Good afternoon and welcome to today's session for PortGen 2021 on the goods and services track. Today we have a whole session on contracting pitfalls. We have Mr. Joshua Bam here from Gravis Law, and he's going to give us an update and all the ins and outs in regards to contracting. Before we get started, we want to encourage everybody to update their name, on your video side, so that we have your name and maybe your company information on there. And I see that we just have coming in is Tina Boyd from the Port of Seattle. And I would like to introduce Aisha Kadri from the Small Business Transportation Resource Center, and let Aisha do an introduction and invite Tina to speak also.
Thank you, Leslie. Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha Kadri, and I'm with the SBTRC. We are very excited to be doing this workshop series, and I just wanted to let you know we'll touch base again at the end of the series, at the end of the workshop today. But if there's anything that I can do or PTAC can do, or the Port Seattle can do, please reach out. I left my number and my email in the chat. If anyone would like it again, please let me know. And then with that, I'll go ahead and introduce Tina Boyd with the Port of Seattle.
Hello, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I don't know what's going on with the visual thing. Yeah, because I can't see me either, but that's okay.
You as well.
Welcome, everybody. I'm hoping and you're getting plenty of information. Please come with plenty of questions. I am going to be stepping in and out of the meeting, but I'll make sure I leave my contact information in the chat, and enjoy yourself today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Tina. Well, I think that we will go ahead and get started. We have a very small, intimate group right now, but we hope to add more participants as we move through the next few hours. I see that we have a new attendee. The name is Shamikia Moultrie, and I saw that she just logged in. And so, not to put you on the spot, but perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself and give us a really quick overview about the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Hi, everyone. So I am the new veteran-owned business coordinator with the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs. I started on the 1st, and I'm learning. So I just wanted to, PTAC is one of the partners that I'm going to be introduced to. It's on the list of partners that I was presented with, and I went on the website and I saw that you guys were hosting a contracting pitfall seminar, and I just wanted to hop in. So veteran-owned business program, we certify veteran-owned businesses within the state of Washington, which is our main job that we do, but we also connect them with our partners, one being PTAC. So I really don't have a lot to give right now. I'm very new in the position. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Shamikia. And if you would you put your contact information in the chat for our participants to be able to reach out to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome aboard. Glad to have you representing the DVA for the state of Washington. So with that, I think we will move to our illustrious presenter, Joshua Bam, again from Gravis Law, all about contracting pitfalls. And, I can only imagine that, the things are going to come up on this, but so go ahead, Joshua, and you have the run of the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you for having me today. I really appreciate everybody's time. Even as an attorney, I want to make sure that things are useful and valuable, and so I'm probably just going to dive in here. But let me introduce myself officially, if that's all right. I'm a managing attorney and principal at Gravis Law. I went to law school at Penn State, the Dickinson School of Law. I basically worked at the Center for the Study of Mergers and Acquisitions there, writing letters to the IRS and white papers and all the most boring stuff that I find fun. And so, you know, after staying in Pennsylvania for a while, it was time to branch out, moved to Seattle, which was really fun. Got to work at in boutique law and construction law and real estate and all kinds of stuff. When Stoll Reeves was working on the big tunnel case for Washington State, for WashDOT, I got to work on that case as well and do some of those depositions and some of those exhibits. And so we just got to see a lot of stuff. Obviously, in Seattle, you find yourself working a lot with the city and with the state. Now I'm in Tri-Cities, Washington, and I find myself working a lot with the federal government, with a lot of subcontractors and individuals who are contractors and potentially looking at primes and stuff. So sort of seen a lot of things in a lot of different industries, a lot of bars and compliance and horrible government systems that you have to work through. But then also on the commercial side, we've seen a lot of international transactions, and we close a lot of deals. I work with a big team here at Gravis Law, including Ruben Ortega, who was allegedly presenting today. But we get to see, you know, maybe 2 to 4 closings a week, and that's sales of companies, investors coming in, big long-term contracts closed. So we do get to see a lot of stuff, and our team gets to see a lot of it as well. So basically today, I think we're just going to start kind of basic and go over the beginnings of commercial contracting and what that looks like. We'll go over some of the terms and specific provisions that we see issues with or that we would generally want to include. We'll go into sort of government specific contracting in some cases. We'll talk about some of the mistakes we see and have some examples for that as well. And then, of course, I think it's worthwhile to talk about actual best practices at the end as well. So we'll close there and then, you know, talk about some resources maybe for finding government contracts if that's useful. So I think that it's worth starting at the beginning of what a contract is, because there are times when we find ourselves defending or trying to get out of a contract by claiming that it never existed in the first place. So I think just knowing what a general contract is worthwhile. In most cases, a contract is an agreement between 2 or more parties. If you're working on government stuff or contract construction, there could be more parties. For example, if you're working in government cases or if you're working on a big construction contract, you might have a client who has a prime contractor and you might be a subcontractor. And that subcontractor agreement might have flow down provisions, which means that the client's contract also applies to you. So in that case, really, the client can be a party, the prime can be a party, and potentially some of the client's affiliates and prime's affiliates can be parties. And so if you really want to drill down on who parties are, sometimes that can be an interesting litigation claim as well. Who's allowed to sue or not allowed to sue under a contract? Most contracts, of course, are goods or services or a mix of both. I think it's important to identify what's a good and what's a service or what's both, because they come with different rights. When you're contracting for goods, there could be uniform commercial codes or other conventions of goods that might apply. The contract, of course, is going to be different. You might have lien rights or like bailments or consignment rights. When you're contracting for services, it's totally different, and those conventions don't really apply. They're going to be covered potentially by maybe mechanics liens if you're in construction, which is statutorily based, or common law or case law. And so if you're mixing goods and services, potentially you're taking 2 separate bodies of law and mixing them together. So you just have to be aware of what you're getting into. We always want to make sure that consideration in a contract is really exchanged. That's real money or real services or something tangible or real or intangible but significant. A promise to pay something later is usually not consideration. So when people sue our clients and say, hey, you promised to pay me under this, random napkin agreement. We can say that wasn't consideration and that's not a contract, and there really is no case. And so making sure that you're in a contract if you want to be in a contract, or making sure that you're not when you're just talking about sort of initial terms is kind of important as well. And that starts at sort of the beginning of what a contract is. We also have to have here a meeting of reasonable minds. I saw that this week when we were passing red lines between parties, and somebody inserted a red line on the back end and said, hey, this is just going to be part of the agreement now. But if the other party doesn't know that the red line's there, or that the contract terms have changed, that potentially is not an agreement. And so, making sure that all the versions are right on the back end, and making sure that someone's administrating like actual contracts and that everybody's aware of what they're signing in reality actually is part of forming the contract. And so sometimes we've escaped contracts because of, misplaced red lines or things that people didn't know were in there. Contracts can be written or oral. Obviously, written contracts are enforced by the terms, in the four corners of the contract, and oral contracts are enforced in court usually. And mostly the attorneys win on that side. So we always say, put it in writing, and especially if it's $500 or more, you have to put it in writing, obviously. So we'll talk about some of the written and oral stuff here in a bit. When we get into like basic goods contracts, this isn't necessarily, government specific. This is general commercial contracts for goods. These are the provisions that we usually see. So it's who are the parties involved, what goods are being shipped or ordered. A lot of times, it's quantity, quality, like the ordering procedure. You want to make it easy for people to order from you. And you don't want to put any of the ordering terms in the contract. You want to put them in schedules and exhibits so that you're not constantly going back and updating contract terms all the time. You're going to be able to sign things and just sort of append them to the terms of the contract. And then one thing we always see missing, which is kind of on purpose here, is sometimes you want to put minimums. Do buyers have to support you like certain amounts? Do they have to buy X quantity over X periods? Because I mean, if you're selling only to one person in a commercial line, that's going to be your whole cash flow and revenue. So you want to make sure that they're buying, or that you're finding somebody else to support that revenue. We want to make sure payment's reasonable. On the payment side for goods, to me, I always want to see some upfront. I want to manufacture, get my administration costs in. I want some kind of down payment. It's usually at least 25%, because when I'm going to manufacture, I don't want to put out-of-pocket costs. That's really hard to sue on later. I want to already have their money and have the goods. And then if we go to litigation, I kind of am at net neutral to some extent. So I always want to get some money up front, maybe some as we go, and then some on delivery. And if possible, again, this is commercial, this is not government regulated or mandated stuff, but I always want to see stuff up front. For goods contracts, acceptance and rejection becomes really a key provision. So if I come and deliver goods to you, what is the criteria that you're going to evaluate them on? Is it some specification sheet in Addendum B? Is it some standard code somewhere that we have for dishwashers or something? What is the acceptance criteria? And then if something doesn't meet that standard, I'm going to reserve rights to me, if I'm the supplier or the seller, to be able to cure that. I want to be able to cure any deficiencies or rejections or whatever without a breach in the contract. And also potentially, if I'm the buyer, I really do want to be able to get the goods and resell the goods. And so the acceptance and rejection, how long do you have to inspect the goods? Are you allowed to inspect the goods at the supplier's place of business? That stuff becomes really important, because we don't want to create an acceptance and rejection provision and then not have a time period, so that there's an unlimited rejection, discretionary at buyer's whim. We want to say, look, if you don't accept or reject within 7 days, then it's accepted. So to some extent, we want to write in like an easy administration practically into our contract. Shipping and risk is a really contentious thing as well. I think just because there's online sales, and everybody wants to avoid risk, and everybody wants to avoid shipping costs and insurance. And there's also a bunch of Incoterms, basically, which are commercial shipping terms. And everyone's confused on commercial shipping terms and what they mean. And when you get to the government side, you have to know your Incoterms and who's paying for what. And basically what this amounts to is if I've manufactured something, or if I am sourcing something as a supplier, I should be able to send those goods to the buyer. And if I'm the supplier, I want the buyer to pay for the insurance and to pay for the transportation. And if something happens on the way, that's the buyer's deal. Obviously, if I'm the buyer, I want the seller to pay for all that stuff, to my place of actual business. And so it feels like parties have been fighting about what the right terms are for a long, long time. But generally what we're seeing now is, in terms of shipping and risk, and even to some extent on the government side, we're seeing a lot of the cost insurance and freight, the CAF tip shipping terms, which sort of splits the risk among buyer and seller and the cost. And basically what CAF, or cost insurance freight, means is that the supplier will create the goods, they'll put it on the boat, and the supplier will pay for the insurance, and the buyer will pay for the freight. And so to some extent, they're kind of splitting the cost. If it's more than the minimal amount of insurance, then the buyer will cover that additional risk. If it's less, then the seller's money for insurance covers it. So usually we see a lot of CAF stuff, or the deliver duty paid stuff with online commercial terms. If you're doing a lot of online goods, most of the time it's just going to be delivered to your door and everything's paid, and you're paying it. The buyer's paying it. So, and it's included in cost. So I think we see, a lot of that stuff. People use Xworks and free on board and a whole bunch of other stuff, free alongside ship. And those things definitely work. They're usually kind of industry specific, and they're usually based on how big goods are. Obviously, if you're shipping like heavy equipment, then free alongside ship is going to make the most sense. And basically what that means is the seller is going to go put that piece of equipment on the dock, and the buyer is going to bring their boat up and pick it up, and that's it. And the buyer, whoever's ship it is, they're dealing with the risk and all the insurance and stuff. And so it really does depend. Are your goods in a container? Are they in boxes? So shipping terms are somewhat specific. When we get to the government side too, they're also defined by the Federal Acquisition Regulations, by the FARs. And so then we always want to go look and make sure that we all understand what the shipping and risk terms really look like. Most of the times in goods contracts, you'll see representations and warranties. I promise no one's like infringed on these goods. I didn't steal this idea from somebody. Promise they're going to work. But at the same time, then you also see waivers and disclaimers like, hey, you can't sue me for more than this contract is worth. Or you can't sue me for lost business profits and those kinds of things. And those waivers and disclaimers also have to be in bold, and they have to be conspicuous, and all kinds of stuff. So we like to have disclaimers, because we like to know at the end of the day, if everything goes sideways, how much is the contract going to cost us if it's our fault? And so I like to have sort of that predictability to some extent, so we can all move on. I also like to have dispute resolution provisions, because if it's international goods, you want to pick a forum and you want to pick set rules, and you want to pick something that governs like English and US law, and you can go enforce in both countries. Applicable laws is usually whichever state you're going to be in, or wherever you're actually doing the business from. We always see that stuff, including severability and etc. And then one thing we see a lot of is electronic signature provisions. So you may not get electronic signature provisions in a lot of government contracts, but if you're doing business online, or if you're hosting stuff or doing construction agreements, maybe not on lien notices, but everyone's using online contracts. So we just want to make sure that it's enforceable. Questions or concerns or thoughts so far?
Well, Joshua, I have a question. So what should the timing be to incorporate legal counsel in anticipation of bidding? Should I do it before I start the bid process? Or should I seek counsel during the bid process so that I can actually show, what's coming down the road in the bid? Or does it matter?
Well, so the bootstrap startup answer is it probably is going to be hard to get counsel on the front end. But in reality, the pre-bid and the bid process is such a specific game, and you have to play it in such a certain way that you have a better odds of winning if you know how to like play toward the agency or follow the checklist and give them what they want in their bid. So to me, even if it's a business advisor, just have somebody who's worked on it before look at your bid and help you with the pre-bid process. Because if you bid and you win, obviously that's a different story. But bidding in itself is kind of a unique game. And so I always recommend having somebody who's done it or seen it, advisor, friend, like somebody who's willing to spend some time on it and go through the checklist and say, yeah, you've got a good bid or proposal here. That's a good point, Leslie.
Thanks.
So services is kind of a totally different game. We're not talking about acceptance and rejection or shipping and risk or any of that stuff. Really what we see the most issues with in services is defining the scope, like defining the real services involved and limiting your whole agreement and your compensation scheme to that scope. And then also creating a standard for how those services are evaluated. So, for example, if somebody comes to us and says, hey, I have this service contract to create this software for this thing, and my service contract says I'm going to perform it to best practices in the industry, then we have to go figure out what best practices the industry is, and that's a pretty high standard. On the other hand, if we can say it's going to be performed in a workmanlike professional manner, that's a pretty generic standard that we can probably appeal to in litigation. And then of course on the construction side, you have national building codes. And so that's really easy to peg a standard for services to and say if it complies, it complies, and if it doesn't, then there's a breach and we'll go cure it. So setting the standard for services is really, it has been really important in disputes and contracts. And then we always see scope creep, which is that somebody has created a scope, but it's not defined and detailed enough, doesn't have enough boundaries and ceilings. And so, the end of the contract, really the client wants them to do more and more, and it's not necessarily excluded by the scope. And it's not really covered by the agreement, but it just kind of is. And then at the end, the client says, well, it's supposed to be covered by the payment. And the contractor says, no, it was more out of scope. And so you have the scope creep that everyone's done a whole bunch of work, and at the end, no one's going to get paid because everyone's unhappy. And so we always want to make sure that's, to me, like there's a whole bunch of stuff in contracts that a business advisor or a lawyer should look over. But a really well-defined, detailed scope that is not going to cost you money on the back end and actual performance, that's definitely worth getting reviewed. We also see a lot of like potential confusion on payment types. And so in services, I love time and materials or cost plus. So time and materials is basically, I'm just going to charge you for how much time we spend on it. I'm going to, have materials and maybe I'll mark them up for whatever. Cost plus would be, I'm going to charge you whatever the costs are for labor and materials and random costs, and I'm going to get a markup for 20% of the project for my margin. So to me, cost plus is my favorite because you always know what the margin is. So that's like construction agreements or any kind of stuff. Like I always want to pass costs through so that we're never setting a ceiling. And then of course you have like bids and guaranteed fees as well, which, you really have to be specific in the scope and what you've bid there, because that's the real fee. So if you go get into those services and it requires a lot more than you thought, than you even bid for, then you're on the hook for the rest of that money. And as a lawyer, I don't really like that on a client side when we're bidding like government contracts and stuff, but usually that's how it is. Then we want to see electronic provisions and stuff as well. Questions or concerns so far? So now I think we just move to like the specific government stuff that we're looking at, because we have all of these like the same goods provisions that we have and the same services provisions. But if you're looking at government detailed specific stuff, there's additional things we have to include. And a lot of that comes from maybe there's like a prime or some agency who's really got the contract, and that main contract flows down. So now not only do we have to look at our subcontract and our prime contract, because that flows down, we have to go look at the client contract, because that also flows down. And so really, you know, for government contracts, we might be looking at 2 or 3 contracts out to see what the real terms of compliance look like. And so that sometimes takes effort. So you have all of these goods things, you know, maybe you're on the GSA and you have that contract, but you also have to go see like, who am I really delivering stuff to? And that does take effort. There's a bunch of required provisions for the government contracts, of course. And so we have to make sure that those are all included in there. If we're doing a small goods or services contract from like Washington State or a developer or something, no one's going to care about anti-kickback rules. It's just not going to happen. And it's not worth probably spending time on drafting it. If you're drafting for a government contract, it has to be in there. And so on that side, you know, I think for subs and primes, usually some of that's like agency created, of course. And so, I mean, it's worth having a lawyer up front that knows what's coming and what has to just be in there. I hate it when unknowns or administrative things or like getting into government systems or something destroys a contract or like ruins a bid and we can't meet a timeline. So that's why I like to get involved on the bid process, because we really want it to go smoothly from bid to contract. Because if it doesn't, we may not get future contracts, but we might also lose this one. And so setting that up and being proactive really does count. Practically integrating with government systems is really hard. With GSA, getting all the accounting, with getting compliance for the FARs in your contract, and if you go look at all the FARs, they've defined all the stuff that's in your contract anyway. And so to some extent, you just have to know that. So for us, we use a lot of checklists, or if we see something that we know is defined or has to be defined, then we go look for it. But you sort of have to have systems in place. Definitely a lot of checklists. There's other stuff you have to know about. There's data breach stuff that's a little different from states. You know, the state data breach might say X, but if you're working for the government, you have to comply with the FARs, and you have to have a compliance plan. So there's just more stuff that you have to have accounting plans. And then of course on the government side, they're going to have specific provisions that might want your IP or might be, you know, unlimited termination for convenience. And so maybe there's indemnification, but it's only one way. So you just have to be aware, I guess, of what the risk is and who stands on what sides of the contract and what risk tolerance you're willing to accept. You know, if it's a government contract and it's worthwhile, who cares if they terminate for convenience? Maybe you're getting paid up front and it's fine. And so, you know, just thinking flexibly, you know, just thinking about some of those items is important. I think in the government side also, we're talking about, you know, a two-party system, but basically we have IFQs, which are requests for quotes. We have IFPs, which are for proposals, and then we have IFBs, which are for bids. And the IFQs are usually for, you know, contracts that are $50,000 or less. IFPs is sort of anything that's maybe up to $2 million or so, and then IFBs are really big, complicated things. And usually the IFBs are sealed. And so that's something that will start the contract, because when we're submitting an IFP, basically we're saying, here's our offer to go do this thing to be in this contract. And if it's accepted, we're bound by it. So to some extent, knowing the difference between IF2 and IFP is great. That's going to determine how we go about attacking that bid. But then IFBs are sealed bids. And so getting all of the scopes and the details in that is important. And we feel okay about doing that because no one else can go see our secret information. Questions or thoughts so far?
Well, you know, Joshua, as you're talking, you know, as a small business owner, I can only imagine the things going through their head. You know, like, you know, what are the opportunity costs? You know, how much is this really going to cost me if I bid on this? You know, and you have to look at the time it takes to bid it. You have to also look at, you know, bringing in professional guidance to go through all the minutia on here. But, you know, the bottom line and the reality is that getting into any kind of a government contract without good decision-making will cost you in the long run.
Yeah.
And you know, keeping good legal resources, good accounting resources can, you know, would be to their benefit in the long term. But, you know, little micro businesses and stuff, you know, they may not be able to do that yet. But, you know, if you're growing and you're moving up to the next level, you know, you know, it's smart to have all of these resources available to you, and then knowing when you need to actually capitalize on them. Because Uncle Sam is rather unforgiving. You know, if you made, you know, cost projection errors, or you didn't really understand the contract, or, you know, any or all of the above. So yeah, it's an eye opener as to all of the little individual things that you're talking about here on, you know, just trying to win a contract.
Agreed. It's a really, really big system. And if you're a small business, you can bootstrap it. I think I say this later, but you can bootstrap it and sort of go along and do the bidding on your own, and it's going to feel and look really sloppy, and you can't see if you're going to win. And then if you do win, it's likely that you're going to have to ramp up operations and put a bunch of money in to like cover the contract. And honestly, I mean, success is also a killer of businesses. And so that's a lot of money. Then you have to manage the cash flow of that. And so you really do have to be ready. Like there is some real life planning you have to go do. If you want to, yeah. I mean, you can go list yourself on the GSA or something and just sell goods or whatever. And, you know, I mean, you could go work as a subcontractor, maybe like somewhere, and, you know, not deal with it too much. But if you're really going to get into government contracting, I agree, you have to try, because it takes that level of effort and like systemic management and automation and knowledge and like technical skills to win bids to begin with, to some extent.
Thanks, Joshua.
No, you're right. So thank you. That makes sense to me. We've helped a lot of people like Bootstrap Bids, and you can sort of build like terms in the middle and get your contracts in compliance, and you can build SOPs and build like, you know, data compliance programs and accounting stuff like in it, but it feels horrible. It's possible, but it's hard. So, and, you know, you have to have a nice attorney to go through that with you, because everyone, yeah, it's hard. So obviously biggest mistakes for contracts, even if you're a small business, you're doing tiny stuff, just please put it in writing. You know, it's way easier to put it on writing, even if it's a napkin. Sometimes short agreements, do-it-yourself agreements are worse because you don't know what you actually agreed to. But if at all possible, it's always at least to some extent better to put it in writing. We see a lot of like disqualifying consideration in our contracts, and those are like the same do-it-yourself contracts where it's like, I promise to pay you $300 if you deliver this thing to me sometime later. And it's not really a contract and the good's not defined, and it's not a thing. And so you can't go enforce it later. So you spent all this time, money, like trying to get this thing, and it's just not an agreement, which is kind of sad. Other times, honestly, the worst things we've seen lately are bad termination provisions. Property management contracts, construction agreements, like real estate rentals that aren't normal commercial broker stuff, random stuff that is just really terrible termination provisions that say, I can terminate it anytime I want. If you want to terminate it, you owe me $50,000. And that's just evil. And the only way to say, okay, look, well, we're not going to do that is to then go to court and get the court to invalidate it. And that's going to cost us like $20,000. And so if you don't have attorney fees provisions and they're like at the bottom, then you're paying to like invalidate a dumb provision. And that just seems mean to clients. So we always try and cover those things as well. Always make sure you have cash flow. Like if you promise to go deliver goods and you get 100% on the back end, funding the manufacturer and shipping and delivery of those goods is going to be really hard. So to me, I always start with what's the cost to get the money, and that's how much we need down. And the rest, to some extent, is kind of margin, or we can work from there. But I never want to start with saying, okay, well now go spend your money out of pocket. Even as an attorney, if we can provide services that are valuable or like will get you to revenue, then it's probably not worth investing in yet. So I think it's worth being able to spot bad deals as well as good deals, because getting into a bad deal can also bankrupt and be a horrible decision as well. So if they're not willing to pay you up front to like go do the stuff, maybe somebody else will, is usually what I say. So I think we talked a little bit about acceptance and delivery for goods. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about those Incoterms a little more. They're also defined in the FARs. So if you're on GSA and you're sending goods to the government, they're going to be using probably one of those. There's basically like 5 most common Incoterms, and so they'll probably be using FOB or something like that. Not having clear risk of loss on stuff is something we see in goods agreements a lot, and that's sad when like a painting or something is gone and nobody knew who owned it or who should pay for it in transit. We had a drum of Moroccan oil that was like a 50-gallon drum of Moroccan oil. It was like $6,000, nothing serious, but it was damaged in transit, and it got to the buyer, and the buyer signed for it and didn't know that it was damaged, and then they opened it and it was damaged. So you're like, well, whose risk of loss is that? Because you signed to say that you accepted it, and now you're saying that it's not good, and the transportation company is saying that you signed. And so just figuring out really clear risk of loss and making sure that people are actually looking at something, unfortunately, is important. We always want to make purchases really easy. Always take them out of the contract. To me, I think you should sign a contract once. If you want to order a bunch of times, no problem. We can put that on addendums or emails or whatever, but we shouldn't be going back to mess with the terms of an agreement. There's too much that could change at that point. People could change their minds and all kinds of stuff. For goods, we always disclaim the International Convention on Goods and Services, just because the terms there are sort of inconsistent with the UCC and it doesn't really matter. Some of the stuff is also contrary to how we want the agreements to read. So maybe not always disclaim, but generally. And then we always want to allow for cure and substitutions, because we never want to have a contract die because 5 items out of 100 were defective. So just having that cure and substitution clause in there will save it. We'll save an agreement basically if we can comply with it. You should be able to cure or substitute within 15 or 20 days or whatever it may be. And then if we had a gate manufacturer who manufactured automatic gates, and they were trying to create specifications of the gates for the clients ordering the gates, like how far they should be and where the motor should be. And we thought, no, I mean, if the client is ordering a gate, they should be able to tell you sort of how long it should be. Like we should put all the technical specifications on the client by addendum or exhibit or whatever it may be. That's agreeable to us, because it's really hard as a supplier or manufacturer to create specifications and to stay to it, and clients are going to say it's not intended for their use, of all kinds of stuff. But on the back end, the litigation, if the client brought to you, the proposal or the request or whatever it is, and put the technical specifications in, if those specifications are wrong, then that's on the client, and that makes litigation so much easier. So much easier to say this is what we got and it was incorrect.
I was Googling up the definitions that you put up there for CIA, or the definitions for CIF, FOB, FAS, FCA. Is the list I just dropped in chat accurate?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. And then the other one we see a lot is delivered duty paid.
DDP.
Yes, sir.
I'm just here to translate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for calling that out, Andrew. So for services, the biggest mistake we see is honestly differing site conditions, which is basically saying, hey, look, I'm going to come provide services. Let's say it's excavation services or something done, and you say I'm going to excavate so that you can put a foundation in. But you get down into the site and there's actually like a main waterway that's 3 feet down that nobody knew about, and it's going to cost $50,000 to remove or reroute that waterway. And so if you didn't put a differing site condition in there and you're under a guaranteed price, your obligation is to dig for the foundation. So that $50,000 is going to the contractor, and that seems mean when nobody knew about it. So to me, and this actually was a large part of what the Seattle tunnel litigation was about with WashDOT and all those folks, STP. But the differing site condition should be like either a shared responsibility or the responsibility of the person providing the specifications, which again should be the client. And so basically, we're setting this whole thing up. I mean, all of our contracts are set up so that we can prepare for litigation if it gets there. But we want to create exits for everybody, for price, for like different conditions, changes in things, just in case. We also want to provide out of scope pricing because of scope creep again. So at some points, if they say, hey, if they keep wanting services, we need an 80th iteration of this source code for our whatever it is. You can say, okay, well, that's out of scope, and now we're going to start charging an out of scope pricing. It's already in the contract. And so I really like to do that. And I also like to detail the scope of work ceilings. We're going to go excavate. We're going to excavate, 2 feet and no more. Anything after that's going to be for money. And we actually had a contractor who bid a job to spray and clean tanks. They were covered in like paint and grime and all kinds of stuff, and then we paint the interior of the tanks. So they bid to scrape, and they bid to clean and spray, and that was their bid, and they were the lowest bid, which in and of itself is scary. And so their bid was accepted. And so when they get there and they start scraping, pressure scraping the inside of the tanks, they realize that like the grime and paint and stuff is not like an inch or two like they thought. It's like 7 inches, and it's going to cost them like $180,000 extra to actually get to the bottom of these tanks. But that was their bid, and there was no like we're going to scrape 2 inches, 1 inch. It was, we're going to scrape till it's clean. And so that cost was borne by the contractor, unfortunately. And so that's where I say upfront, when you're like bidding on something, please have your business advisor or attorney or anybody just look at it and say, hey, did we put a limit on here? Because if this goes sideways, could this cost you $200,000 or something? And so I think, so that's something we just see a lot. And then of course, you know, picking a real price, real fee structure. That's a hard one. Sometimes it's a mix of all kinds of things. So making sure that at the end of the contract, you're really going to have a margin to do the next contract. That's important. We see contractors come and do like, you know, 80-unit apartments, and the cost of that apartment is so much that even with their margin, they can't survive. And so it was their first big project, their biggest success, and now they're going to close their business because they didn't make it. And so, you know, just be aware that cash flow and stuff has to be calculated into all of it. Questions or anything so far? So for government stuff, honestly, the biggest stuff we see is appealing to the right agency, appealing to the right officer, making sure that your bid kind of sets their internal targets. Like if you go, I mean, really, if you go ask for feedback from an agency, usually they'll tell you a little bit about what they're looking for. And sometimes it's not always lowest cost or something. Sometimes it's something strange. And so on that side, I think, to me, the biggest mistakes are if you're in the system and getting in the system is no problem, and you got the FARs and that's no problem. Then when you're doing your bid, actually being in touch with the agency who's acquiring those services or goods, that is super valuable information. And I think like you guys are in this meeting right now, and so you know it's not insanely hard to get with acquisition officers or like people who are purchasing. It's you can do it if you want to, and so that's been some of the best feedback for us. So I think Leslie said this earlier. You got on your bid, you got one chance across. You know, did you detail them? Did you get it right? Do you have all your tools in there? Do you have your labor? Like, will you need more wire? Will you need hookups? Like, it is true that Uncle Sam is not forgiving. So if you are the lowest bid because you messed up, then congratulations and good luck. And so, you know, I just want somebody to look at that, because when you put that bid in, that really is an offer that can be accepted immediately. So good and bad. For government stuff, obviously, you know, it's complicated systems. You have to have accounting systems and cost systems, and you have to manage all the insurance for each project. You got to keep records forever, maybe subject to audits. There's a lot of stuff that you just have to get in order in your house. Not end of the world stuff, but just stuff that takes effort. And so I think being afraid of that, being afraid of getting in the system, being afraid of missing set-asides because it's too hard is also a mistake. So balancing, you know, how much do I want to grow and spend on this, and what is the value of this thing? That's something that a business owner has to decide. I hate the stuff where people are working for a government, collecting data in a certain location or sell data or whatever it may be, and they're using all of their stuff, and they get to the end of the contract and the government takes all that stuff because the contract probably says you have no rights to your IP that you use for all of this work. And so if you're using software or specific stuff that's your IP, creating a carve out for background IP or your IP or mutual use, I mean, agencies are willing to talk about that stuff. But when you get a contract potentially from an agency on the government side, it's always going to be that your IP is going to be theirs. And so being able to push back on some of that mutual indemnification or reasonable termination of things, you know, it's possible. We see the government get really mad when their most favorite customer provisions aren't adhered to, and they find out about it. Some of it's just for like concrete or random stuff, and they figure out you're pouring for less a square foot at some like commercial property, but you have an MFC provision in the contract, the government's supposed to get that price immediately. And so then you have to potentially go back and get invoices and all kinds of stuff. So just being aware of what's in the contract and keeping a record of what your prices are, it is what it is. Questions or concerns so far, or other stuff that you guys see?
So Joshua, in regards to the MFC provisions, that's a good reminder for PTAX to add that to our little laundry list of acronyms. Primarily, the bottom line is the US federal government is always your most favored customer. And they always get the lowest price. And, you may have an ongoing contract for widgets or whatever. And maybe somebody in private industry wants you to supply widgets to them, and you undercut the price, that you were doing your government work for. That's such, it's just looking for trouble. And I don't really know that a lot of small businesses understand that whatever it is you quoted to the government, nobody is lower than that in your world. So
That's right. Even if it's after that contract,
yeah,
you have to go back and say, this is our lowest price.
yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up.
It's so many dumb little things like that make this hard, that you sort of have to be proactive and automate and get an administrative system in place. I work with contractors it's just one person, and they do all of this stuff just by themselves, and they go back every year and just get their contract renewed, and they don't make any fuss, and nobody knows they're there. And it's definitely possible. It just takes some front end effort.
Well, and it relates back to the managing insurance and record keeping. Anybody who's ever been an accountant or lived with an accountant, or were the daughter of an accountant, knows and understands documentation and audit trails. And some of us are very left brain linear, and so this comes really naturally to us. But in for other industries, creative people, manufacturing people, the record keeping may be the last thing in their mind.
That's right.
But it cannot be discounted, if you're, again, dipping your toe in government waters. They do audit, and they do want to see your records, everything from employee records to quality control manuals to accounting systems, and so if you're really, really small, you just need to be aware that this could be a burden on you and your company, unless you have the resources to get you through this. And perhaps maybe it's a simple fix, like you bring in a contractor for 1 month out of the year to get everything up to snuff, or you hire a part-time individual that will take care of this for you. But no, that's a really rough area to shortchange, I'll tell you.
Agreed, and you feel it too. It's not something that you can get away with. If you're really not ready for it, it feels hard.
Yeah. So I see Marnie raised her hand. So hi, Marnie.
Hi there. I just wanted to thank Joshua for really pushing the have a third party person review it, because you could get stuck with the price that you put into your contract. I was supporting a client, and the bid tab came out, and one of their competitors was the apparent lowest price. But the contracting officer, wonderfully enough, gave them the opportunity to withdraw their bid because they were 25% lower than their competition, because in their bid proposal, they had copied and pasted an amount in their bidding, which completely messed up their pricing. And they would have been stuck with that contract had the contracting officer moved forward, and could legally have been. However, that officer was nice enough to give them the opportunity to fully withdraw their bid.
That's rare.
But
That's,
they didn't have somebody else review it and just double check for those simple mistakes that we make as people.
I know, and it's part of like your industry, and if you're working, you're just working, and that this all just seems like horrible bureaucracy and like stupid paper pusher stuff. But at the end of the day, like you're going to be tied to it. So that's a really good point. We were working, unfortunately, and it was in the news and all kinds of stuff, but we were working with a government contractor out here in Tri-Cities, and they were staffing a whole bunch of agencies for Hanford, and they got the lowest bid and all that kind of stuff, and so they needed money basically to ramp up their operations and kind of keep it going. So they went to a small community credit union and got a bunch of money so that they could like basically service this government contract, right? So this was their decision. We're going to go get a bunch of money so that we can get this government contract. Totally fine decision. You can make that choice. But you know, the credit union loan terms said, hey, if we don't like this loan as part of our portfolio, we can call it anytime. So a few years later, they did call it. And it just destroyed the small business because they didn't have enough to actually service the government contract they promised that they would service, because they couldn't actually get the resources in to do it.
Wow.
And it's horrible, just something so stupid. And then of course, like the government, like all the prime contractors are going to sue. Like you're not going to get out of that. They have lawyers that are just ready, and so then you got to go through all the lawsuits. You know, no fault, but just it's a hard decision. To say, yeah, we're going to ramp up and really go put money into this and do it well. And if you only do it halfway, there's a good chance it can come get you.
I have to say that, you know, I tell all of my clients, I'm not an attorney, but if I see something that's questionable, I'm going to tell you, you have to talk to an attorney about this before you decide to move forward. At least get input on the legal side of what this clause or this provision within this contract means to your company. And I do that daily, probably when I'm doing solicitation reviews with clients. And I'm going through a solicitation and the sample contract that's associated with it, with all the clauses and provisions, making sure that my clients read through them. They don't just skim over those clauses and provisions, and trying to really push when I'm talking to a tiny company, like a mom pop, 2 people in the company, and they just want to get the work. They don't want to have to go talk to an attorney, but they can get stuck. I had one client who didn't come to me before, didn't have somebody review it, and missed clauses that cost him $20,000 on his $40,000 contract. You know, so he ended up paying the agency to work with them after he signed the award, you know? So it was like, those clauses are so not industry, they're legal terms. It's another language for so many businesses, and it helps to have a translator.
It's true. It helps to have somebody and to just know what's in it. That's a really good point. I was working with a friend at Towers Watson not too long ago, and one of their general counsel missed the red line clause, and it cost them $20 million. And I mean, those are bad nights. So the clauses, you know, you can go read them generally, and they can mean general things, but most of the time, like, there is a practical application, and you should go look at it, because a clause could mean something to a big business that if you're a mom and pop would literally destroy you. So I agree with you 100%. So to me also, I know this is getting really picky, and a lot of people are going to be at this place, but I just want to I just want to provide a disclosure because this bidding process potentially for the government could be public, right? At the end, you can go see who bid if it's not sealed. So if it's not an IFB, if it's an IFQ or an IFP, you can potentially go see like who bid on the project. And so when we have clients who are selling their business and they potentially are selling it to like a competitor in a different jurisdiction, but they're both bidding on government contracts, that can say a lot about a target's financials and what they're willing to charge and stuff. So to some extent, we want to make sure that if you are targeted an acquisition and you know a competitor's bidding too, hopefully it's a sealed bid, or we want to know that there's just a lot of people bidding so that your name can be mixed in, or maybe we want to bid with a different entity because we don't want the acquirer to know how much your bid is and what your assets look like and all that kind of stuff, because that could change the acquisition price. So something kind of weird to think about, but a lot of things that the contractors will do with government stuff is going to be public. And so that can kind of mess with the public acquisition game, where a company is doing government things and is acquiring a target that's doing government things. They can both see a lot about each other before they buy each other. And that can sometimes affect, values negatively or positively. But that came up not too recently that someone was bidding on the same contract and that all their information. So what do you do with that? Sort of hope for the best, and you weigh risks again there as well. So much of the time, there is a guy that comes every time, and he really does make no noise. He really just does his contract here for MSA, just hangs out, charges the same stuff, updates his contract every year. That guy is going to work for the federal government forever because nobody knows he's there. he made work really easy, and to some extent, like we find that if you're easy to work with and stuff moves forward and you get deliverables and you're generally like a good contractor, you're probably going to get more jobs and people will recognize you in the network and those kinds of things. And so my recommendation is on that side, have a business attorney or lawyer or whatever, but set it up right the first time and keep it as consistent as possible, because that's how you get good routine business. Thoughts or questions or other examples or anything?
I have a question. It's Marnie again. How do you deal with, you have an ongoing contract, but due to regulations, due to change in people, due to some sort of change on the government side, your standing contract that you just renew every year, they change the interpretation, they change some sort of minor regulation. How do you recommend, other than just, okay, sure, whatever, how do you deal with those changes? For example, interpretation of the need for cell phones, whether it's a business need, allowable expense, or a personal use item.
Yeah, that is really hard. I mean, there's always changes, and we try and keep on top of it and advise everybody beforehand so that you can sort of make decisions up front. But that's tough. And in long-term contracts, it's for especially for people who are just working, they have a smaller staff, they're not like big business with compliance teams and stuff, you're likely going to find that out by some rejection of an expense or cost or something, unfortunately. Because those folks usually aren't paying for legal reviews and stuff. There are like a few resources and stuff for finding out what trends are coming down and what FARs are being reinterpreted or reissued, or what opinions are coming out. But that in and of itself is a full-time job. So to some extent on that side, at least for clients who are doing it themselves, I would say triage that, which is look for the big stuff, because if you lose out on like a month or something, 2 months of cell phone, like it's not the end of the world. But if you're non-compliant in a contract term and it gets terminated, then that is sort of a big deal. And so unfortunately for small clients, we triage it. For bigger clients, you run compliance. You run compliance audits on yourself all the time. That's a horrible answer. But that's what we end up doing. Do you see anything different, Marty?
No, that just it kind of makes sense. Like, is it worth fighting for the cell phone bill versus losing the contract completely? Basically breaking down to what's the most important argument we need to make. It's funny because it always seems like it comes down to interpretation versus regulation.
That is sorry.
So it's like, is it, for example, if I'm stuck with this contracting officer or contract administrator, their interpretation of what's allowable versus what my interpretation of what's allowable when I read the same regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know.
So there's a couple things. For me, sometimes officers are different, so I don't know if you could work with any other officers. But I know that that's really weird, but you're 100% right. And each officer will give you something totally different. It's all interpretation. But the other thing is too is, evaluating the cost, because the more you talk about that, the more they're going to remember who this client is potentially, or who this person is. So if it's like, $1,000, it's probably worth paying for a $20,000 or $50,000 contract or whatever. Just because we don't want them necessarily to remember our name that much. So that's a hard balance.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I've run into it, the changing regulations. And I mean, I do government counseling, so I deal with all the changing regulations and having to try and stay on top of the wave. But then you get a barrel roll and you get messed up. So I appreciate your input. And I think my favorite comment is it depends on the situation. Whenever I'm counseling clients, like, let's look at this specific agency, this specific contract. We can't compare it to others. It's one at a time we look at.
So true. And this specific expense, like, is this one worth fighting about, compared to the value of this contract? So those are worth fighting.
Yeah.
But, it's totally specific, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry to give a terrible answer. Just a stupid lawyer answer, but unfortunately that's the way to do it in this case. But this is just what we're talking about. Best practice is be flexible. Each negotiation is totally different. Each time you get to a change order or differing site, or each contracting officer or administrative or procurement officer is going to be different. And each contract is new. Each relationship is new and different. So you just have to be flexible and navigate it. And you also have to navigate it in a way that the other party is happy as well. If you want a long-term relationship, you can't always get your way, and that sucks. You can always get your way, but it's not going to always go well. If you really want to build something and have more contracts, it's got to be to some extent beneficial for both parties, and both people have to be happy. Unfortunately, but it does work. Always detail prices, always provide super clear scopes with really clear boundaries. We're going to excavate to X, we're going to scrape to Y. We're going to provide, services up to 10 hours, and then the rest is normal out of scope stuff. Just so that everybody knows what we're about to go do. Always have multiple outs. So if you're providing like construction materials to the government for some reason, and the industry prices go up 10%, we want to have an out for that. Like the prices, the prices then on our construction stuff has to go up too, because we're not going to cover the cost of inflation for whatever that may be. So we need an out for prices. We may need outs for agreements. We want outs for like random defaults of the government and stuff like that as well, because they're contracting as a commercial party. So we can require that stuff from them. I use a lot of checklists, a lot of checklists for bar compliance, for bid compliance, for pre-bid stuff, for like data breach stuff, for accounting, for cost compliance. We checklist all the stuff. Like if you're sending out a bid, we're going to go through a checklist, which is really fun. But I want to do the same thing every time, and that's what I'd recommend to clients too who are doing this seriously: is build standard operating procedures and just do it the same way every time, because your bids and everything that you do is just going to get better and better. I know I'm out of time. If you have the money, plan in advance. If you don't, and you're willing to deal with it, and you sort of have the money or can get it, you can make the first transaction sloppy and work your way through it. It sucks, it feels horrible, and it's going to be expensive, but after that, it'll be a lot easier. And so we've worked with those clients too, and we just want everyone to be on the same page. Always review the provisions of the agreement, and then if you're going to go create a bunch of money in a small business, have an estate plan. Make sure that at the end of your life, your value is going to go somewhere. It's not just going to go to the state who you've been serving for the last 30 years. So have a will and a power of attorney and all that kind of stuff so that your business can continue. Just a couple of resources if anybody's looking or might just want to talk more about where to get contracts. And that's all I have. Thank you guys very much for having me, and thank you for letting me go a couple minutes over as well.
Well, thank you, Joshua. You're not going to get away so easy, though. What I would like to have you do as we, kind of move into the next section is give us a little bit of background about Gavis Law and, how long they've been around, and are they just local to the west side of Seattle? What's the deal with them?
No, thanks, Leslie. So Gavis Law has been around for about 5 years. We're one of the fastest growing law firms in the country. I think it's because a lot of the small and solo firm attorneys are just looking for love and support. And so we're giving them a place to get resources and to do the stuff they love. That's sort of work-life balance as well. So our CEO is Brett Spooner. He does a lot of community involvement and lets the firm do a lot of community involvement. I'm working for pro bono associations and all kinds of stuff too, which is really fun. We have about 50 attorneys and about 70 support staff. We're all over the place in Florida, and Idaho, and Arizona, and all over the place. Dayton, Seattle, all the good places in Washington as well. But we just have a large network and a really good team. We don't charge we don't charge like ridiculous Seattle fees. So we want to make sure we can sleep at night too, and that people are really getting value. So a lot of the lawyers you'll find here are people who have, like Ruben's worked in-house counsel and just seen a ton of transactions. I got to work in Seattle and see a bunch of transactions. People who have just done a lot of stuff usually and enjoy what they're doing, and also like working for clients who enjoy what they're doing. And so we've had a lot of success on that side. It's been really good. We handle all kinds of practice areas, from divorce to criminal law and defense, obviously criminal defense, and real estate, estate planning. And then I just mostly do mergers and acquisitions and business law. Anytime you find an attorney that does divorce law and criminal law and business law, you should run from that person because they don't do any of those things. And so here we basically just focus and we have teams to support us as well, which is great.
Well, it's really an eye-opener, everything that you covered today. Some of it really dovetails well into the PTAC world and our government contracting. We kind of speak a similar language, although sometimes when you get into any legal or into any government conversation, it's like they're all speaking in Klingon. So it's good to have an interpreter that can kind of dissect and define things for you. So again, thank you so much. And I'll remind our participants that his slideshow is available in our link. And I believe that that was posted in the chat earlier. And, if you want to get hold of Joshua or Marnie or any of us here on the panel, free feel to give us a little nudge in the chat. And Joshua just posted up his contact information. And so we're really excited to get to know your acquaintance and look forward to hopefully continuing on on other projects down the road. So thank you so much, Joshua, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Thanks, everyone. Talk soon. Take care.
Thank you. So welcome back, everyone. This session 2 is actually going to be kind of divided up into 3 different areas. And the first one up is David Waltz. He's from the Naval Undersea Warfare Center Division out of Keyport. And David is the Deputy for Small Business. And if you ever wanted to find out, about doing business locally on, off of I-5 with the US Navy, David will be a really great resource for you. So with that, I'll turn this over to David and we'll hear what he has to say. So thanks, David.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be able to attend these events and be able to speak and have an opportunity to meet local small businesses in the Puget Sound area and in the state of Washington. So a little bit about myself. I am David Walls, and I'm a longtime Washington State native. I grew up here and went to high school here, and at 18, I went off and joined the Air Force. And did that for 21 years and moved back to Washington State and was able to get a job in the acquisition world at Keyport. Did some contracts for the first 8 years of my career before moving over to the small business side of the house. And really my job is to try to broaden our small business vendor base at the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. Next, I'm going to go to the next slide here. Let's see if it's going to allow me to. There we go. So here's the agenda. Just going to talk a little bit about Keyport, what our mission is, and the types of things that we buy and how we buy it. And then later on in the presentation, I just have a snapshot of what's out there, some current opportunities. And then I'll talk about doing the top tips for doing business, not only with Keyport, but it kind of goes across the line with doing business with the Navy. Also some upcoming events that I'll be participating in, contact information, and then some time for, I guess questions might be later on. There's some other presenters, but a little bit about new at Keyport. We provide advanced technical capabilities for undersea warfare. And here's just an overview of the areas where we have our technical capabilities. So test and evaluation, that's deals with our testing and our ranges. So we test torpedoes. We're known as Torpedo Town USA. So we have a torpedo maintenance facility where we work on torpedoes and the targets as well. We have a couple boats that we go out and do our testing. In-service engineering. In-service engineering is kind of broad. It supports torpedoes, but also undersea weapon systems, and as well as like the submarine force and unmanned underwater vehicle support. Maintenance and industrial support. I talked a little bit about our maintenance for our torpedoes and the targets. We have a fleet material readiness section, as well as a logistics support. So we have an Echelon 5 command, which is located in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, and they do all of the warehouse support for all of the warfare centers. So there's 10 warfare centers within NAVSEA, 8 of which are surface warfare centers. Keyport and our sister organization out in Newport, Rhode Island, we're the 2 undersea warfare centers. So Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, they do a lot of the warehouse support, logistics support for not only Keyport, but for all of the warfare centers. And we do the contracting for those contracts. We also have an unmanned underwater vehicle support section. We were the first squadron in the Navy for unmanned underwater vehicles. I do believe there's another squadron that's been brought up, but we were the first. So we do work and maintain unmanned underwater vehicles. We also have a very large acquisition group, contracts group, where we do cradle to grave contracting. We have an obsolescence management group that works on all of those parts that are obsolescent, no longer around. So we could work on those with with that group as well. We even do some work with the Air Force with that obsolescence management group to get parts for B-52s and all that good stuff. And then we also have our corporate operations group. Corporate operations is wide. That's kind of our admin support, IT support, HR division, all of our training needs, hiring needs, and all that good stuff falls under corporate operations. Here's our technical capabilities. So these technical capabilities, they all kind of fall in line with our test and evaluation, our in-service engineering, as well as the industrial and maintenance support. So one of the things I didn't touch on is, our ranges. We have ranges right here in the Puget Sound area where we do a lot of our test and evaluation. We also have a range up in Canada where we partner with our Canadian naval partners. And there's also a range right off of the coast of the state of Washington in the Pacific Ocean. So that's where we do a lot of our test and evaluation for our unmanned underwater vehicles, as well as our torpedoes. We also have our weapons and the submarine undersea weapon systems that we are always improving on through our in-service engineering department. And you can see some of the other things that we do as far as our corporate logistics. I was talking about, with our logistics group over in Mechanicsburg. But anyway, these are just our technical capabilities that fall in line with our mission that we have. Another area where we have a depot maintenance area in Hawthorne, Nevada. That's another area where we have a detachment. We also have detachments in Hawaii and in San Diego where we do some contract work as well. So I wanted to bring this slide up because we have a small business first mentality at Keyport. We're always striving to do business with Keyport. If we do not do set-asides with our small businesses, we always find room for them in our full and open competition, where we require a small business participation requirement as one of our factors in our full and open contract opportunities. So this is showing how we did for small businesses as a prime. In 2021, we had a target of 29.5%, and we finished with 35.08% overall. We did miss in a couple of our socioeconomic categories, and there are some reasons behind that. Whether a company that we had a contract with, graduated from a different program to a contract that had expired. But that we weren't planning on, those types of things when we set our goals. But for the most part, we meet our goals, and we expect to meet our goals every year. So anyway, we do try to have that small business first mentality. Here's our top 10 NAICS codes at Newark Keyport. That first one, 334511, the source detection, navigation, guidance, aeronautical and nautical system, and instrument manufacturing. That one is, the one that we spend the most money on. And that deals with a lot of the torpedoes and the components that go in, those torpedoes or in the targets. As well as our largest contract on Keyport is the technical insertion hardware And that is on all of the submarines throughout the Navy. So, that NAICS code is very broad in the contracts we do. We do some set asides with that NAICS code. So I don't know if there's anybody on the conference today that has that NAICS code. If so, please contact me. I'd love to have a discussion with you further where we could see how your capabilities could fit at Keyport. Engineering services, that one is very broad as well. That one is used for our Seaport Next Generation MAC contract, and that's our multiple award contract for all of our services. So the title of that NAICS code is engineering services, but like I said, it's very broad under Seaport. That's also our admin contract, financial management, program management contract, IT contract services. So like I said, it's very broad. So shipbuilding, that one is a top 10 NAICS, but next year it might not be, because we just did our regular overhauls on our yard torpedo boats. So next year, I don't expect that to be a top 10 NAICS code. So if you are a shipbuilding, ship repairing company that's visiting today, the shipyard is probably the best bet for you. Yes, we have some boats, but we don't do a lot of, we only do those, that NAICS code, every few years. So anyway, you can see some of the other ones. The one NAICS code that I'm always looking for help is that machine shops. We do a lot of machining and fabrication work, especially dealing with build-to-print type of contracts. So if you're a machine shop or if you do any type of fabrication, I'd love to talk to you as well. This kind of goes with that last slide. This is how our money is kind of broken out. As you can see in the largest blue piece of pie there, that's for that 334511. You can see that we put a lot of money there. Second biggest pie is that engineering services. And if you're interested, I could make these slides available to you. I could send them to you. Again, here's just some of those things that we do buy that I'd mentioned earlier. Torpedo components, of course, to maintain our torpedoes and our targets. Installation items for boats and for subs. Build a drawing type items. So to build a drawing type items, you do need to have a JCP certification to get those drawings. For some of our drawings that are related with a weapon system, our technical folks have requested a higher than basic on the NIST 800-171 assessment. So I'll talk about that a little bit later if I have time. And then some of the other things, vessel support, shop support, the services, like I had mentioned, that's going to be on Seaport. And then our material, that one's going to, that's kind of like some of our PCB boards and stuff like that. Furniture buys would be on our Navy BPA. So we go to a required source first, which is Unicor. If Unicor does not, if they pass on that, then we use the Navy BPA. And then going further, we'll go to GSA if the BPA doesn't pan out for us. But I don't think we ever have to go that far. Again, going back to what we buy, the NAICS code, that breaks it down just a little bit more. I do want to point out that last NAICS code, that last bullet for construction. At Keyport, we do not do a lot of construction, but we have been given authority to start doing some small construction projects. Most construction is going to be done through NAVFAC or the Army Corps of Engineering, like for our major construction, but we've been able to take some of those smaller projects off of their hands and contract out ourselves. And I just kind of gave some examples of some of those opportunities. I will say for the NAICS, that where it says information, software, licenses, and subscriptions, we use NASA SOUP for any hardware buys. And so if you do provide IT hardware, we do go through NAVSEA. If you're not a NAVSEA holder right now, if you're not on that GWAC, then I believe they're going to be opening up for new companies here in the next 2 to 3 years. If you do want to sell to us, you can subcontract with some of those NAVSEA providers. Just a quick snapshot of how we buy. We do have a purchase card agent. Those items under $10,000 will go on a purchase card. I do not see those requirements come across my desk. Generally, requirements generators have their own credit card folks. So they will either go to people that they've done business with in the past, or if they have to do, they'll go to GSA to find products. So I don't see anything that comes across my desk that's $10,000. Excuse me, under $10,000. Over $10,000, I see everything. What we have is, what we have to do for those items over $10,000 is a small business coordination record. And I have to see if there's anything, if what we're trying to buy can be set aside for small business. And that's what that record shows. So I kind of have an idea what's going to come across my desk. They don't have to post it on SAM unless it's $25,000 or more. But if there's drawings, it will be posted on SAM. So you have an opportunity to see those requirements. Again, I'd mentioned NAVSEA, IT hardware, software. They might not come across on SAM because we're going to go directly to NAVSEA. Services, we only will make those announcements through Keyport. So if you're a service provider, you're not going to see any of those requirements on SAM. We'll only have those on Keyport. I do see there's a hand up. Andrew, do you have a question?
Yeah, just in regards to the soup thing, I've helped some people try and get on that list. And if I'm not mistaken, we're looking at about 10 different contractors that they rotate from to get the priority on who's next, who's next, who's next. Now, are you using that same list of contractors, or are you just making a request through NASA, who will then order the components and then you will get them from NASA?
Yeah, so the way it works is when we have a requirement that's going to be for IT hardware, we will go out to NAVSEA, and there's different groups in NAVSEA. So you have a group where it's everybody can be involved, and then you have small business groups. So you could have like a hub zone group, and I believe there's it's either a woman-owned small business group or SDVOSB group. Anyway, I think there's only 2 socioeconomic categories and then a small business group. So we will post it out there, and it's open to anybody if they could provide, if they have the capabilities to provide, and then it's typically lowest price acceptable. So it's not just 10 companies or whatever, it's whoever is available on NAVSEA.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Am I doing okay on time, Leslie? You're muted, sorry.
Yeah, we have about 7 minutes.
Okay, great. I'm almost done. So the next couple of slides are what is out on SAM and on and some upcoming opportunities on Keyport at, through our location. So some of these, the N4 EAM software support renewal, as you can see, that is limited source. Limited source basically means, hey, there's a requirement for this software. There's a company that makes this software, and we're not going to go sole source to that company. We're going to accept bids from some recommended source, or not recommended sources, but required sources through that company. So you have to be a partner with that company in order for us to buy your services there. We have some of these close tomorrow, so I don't know if you have enough time, those cold gas pressure cylinders and the FES tubes and hoses. Those are supposedly going to close tomorrow. They might be extended. I'm not sure, but anyway, might not have enough time to propose or put a bid together or a teaming arrangement, but I just want to kind of show you some of the things that we are buying. We do have a pre-solicitation out there for cell battery. So the pre-solicitations are good because it just kind of gives you an awareness of it, something that's coming down, helps you get ready for that. This one, if you went to look at that particular requirement right now, it might say the anticipated solicitation was a couple weeks ago. They haven't put the solicitation out there. So I've been having to call contracts and say, hey, what's going on with this? And they keep pushing it back. Should be out soon though. Again, here's more active. That Mark 54 lightweight band assembly, that one closes today. So again, you might not be able to have time to put something together for that one. And a lot of these are full and open. I do want to just let you know that when it's full and open, we really do look at every proposal that comes in and gives everybody a fair chance. So there are a lot of times when a small business will propose and they do win. We never go with the incumbent. I shouldn't say we never go if the incumbent has the best proposal. We just kind of look at everything as a brand new solicitation. We give everybody a fair shot. So don't let full and open scare you. There's a couple of those construction contracts I was talking about. Those do close tomorrow. That VTC equipment, again, that's a limited source. And I will say that some of these, like the VTC equipment, we did go out on NASA SOUP first and we didn't get bids. So then we have to put it out on SAM for everybody. So there are times when we'll put something on SOUP and we don't get anything. So if you're not on SOUP, there's still a chance. Here's some upcoming seaport opportunities. So you see that in-service engineering, it's tiered. That's a different acquisition strategy that we have not done at Keyport in the past. And the way the tiered strategy works is we will get some, we'll look at small businesses first. And if we don't have a technically acceptable small business, then it's going to open up to everybody. But if we do have at least 2 technically acceptable small businesses, then we're going to award to a small business. And the reason we did it that way is because we wanted to try to avoid some risk there. Because that one has always been a full and open, and we've only had large businesses in the past. Again, some more upcoming seaport opportunities. If you're not a seaport holder, you could still participate as a subcontractor. And if you're interested in that, please contact me and I'll get you a list of some of those seaport companies that I've worked with in the past. Maybe you could team up with them. Top tips. I know I'm running out of time here, so I'll make this really quick. So if you want to find out more what we buy, the Department of the Navy Office of Small Business Programs have a great website where you could, they have in their website what the Navy buys, which is a 3-year snapshot of what we have bought, and you can do a search through NAICS or through keyword searches. It's a great tool, and then you could start setting up meetings with some of those small business companies. Make sure that you have a company profile in your SBA Dynamic Small Business Search. If you're not sure, I would recommend that you'd go to that SBA Dynamic Small Business Search tool. Just put in your company cage code and just see what's in there. If it's blank, I would encourage you to put something in there, because if it's blank, a lot of times you're going to be skipped over during that market research. Have a good capability statement. Some of the things that we look for, NAICS codes, CAGE codes, and PTACs are a great source to help you. And some top tips for firms. At Keyport, the two that I really want to point out is that JCP certification and the NIST 800-171 medium assessment. So JCP certification, in order to get any drawings, you're going to have that JCP certification. And the person whose name is on the DD form 2345, that is has to be the person requesting those drawings. Otherwise, you're not going to get those. NIST 800-171, DFARS is requiring that companies have that NIST 800-171, but a lot of companies are only getting the basic level, which is fine. You know, basic is good. But I wanted to let you know that if the requirement is directly to a weapon system, we are looking at the medium assessment. So if you are a company that works on weapon systems, or I would encourage you to try to get that medium assessment. Work with, each state has what's called an MEP. I don't remember what the MEP stands for, but ours in the state of Washington is Impact Washington, and they can help you get to that medium assessment. And then there's some other tips there as well, but just because I'm running out of time here, some upcoming events. I do a monthly event called Wednesdays with the Deputy for small business. If you want to join me for that, just send me an email. Let me know that you want to participate in the October event, and I'll put you on the registration. Alliance Northwest, if you've never attended, it's a great event. It's a very large event. I would encourage you to come there for a great networking, matchmaking opportunities for you at that event. My contact information. I also have Northwest Tech Bridge contact information there as well. Northwest Tech Bridge, they're not a contracting agency, but they are a facilitator. And man, the sun is coming right on me. Look at that. It's kind of crazy. Anyway, they can help you navigate through government contracting, point you in the right direction. They work a lot with Cyber, Sitter, and a lot of R&D companies. So anyway, if you're interested in talking with them, there's their contact information. And I'm not the only one in the Puget Sound area with the Navy. Here's some contact information for my friends at the shipyard, NAVSEA, the Fleet Logistics Center, as well as NAVFAC. NAVFAC Northwest that's who you want to talk to for construction. And that concludes my briefing.
So, wow, David, you're so efficient. That doesn't surprise me. But first of all, I wanted to acknowledge your service in the United States Air Force. Thank you so much for your service.
Oh, thank you.
And we really are appreciative of you always, coming to our events and sharing your story and leaving us, with so many really great resources. So with that, we'll thank you, and I'll see you in October on the 27th. So thanks for coming, and we will share your slides, and we also have this videotaped, so
Great.
it will be available on YouTube, and we'll let all of our participants know that at the time. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
we'll take just a really short break here.
Okay, and Leslie, do you want me to stay on to the end for question and answers? Or are we done with me for the day?
Well, I think you're probably good to go. We'll assemble any additional questions and get those shot off to you.
Okay,
So,
great.
Thanks, David, for everything. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to just take a momentary break. Next up on our calendar is City of Tacoma. We have Tina Ide, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, senior buyer for the city of Tacoma. And we'll give her a moment to launch her share screen, and then we'll be good to go. Hi, Tina.
Hello, good afternoon. Let me pull up my presentation.
Okay.
Have it? There it is.
All right.
Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much. And,
Great.
and we'll just hand it over to you. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for inviting me. My name's Tina Eide. I'm a senior buyer with the Procurement and Payables Division at the City of Tacoma. And just wanted to talk a little bit about contracting opportunities with the city. I'm going to go through a short slideshow presentation, and feel free to jump in with questions. And if you raise your hand or put something in the chat and I don't see it, feel free to grab my attention. Okay. So I'm going to go over a little bit of our website overview, talk about bidding and submittal information, and we have a slide for our accounts payable contacts so that when you are doing business with the city, you know who to talk to if you have questions about invoicing. So start at thecityoftacoma.org. It's a great website if you want to just find out what things are going on in the city, who different contacts are at the city. But if you're on the main page and you go under the government tab, this will give you a list of the different government pieces we have, including mayor's office. We're in the city departments, and we're under the finance department. And then we're under procurements and payables division to get to the purchasing. There you can see. So, and if you don't want to go through all of those web pages to get to our contracting opportunities, you can always go through the shortcut, which disappeared off my screen for a second. So we have a purchasing direct link to the TacomaPurchasing.org. This will take you to the page we're looking at right now, or you can go through all the breadcrumbs of the city. And this will take you into contracting opportunities, is where we list our bids, and we have them in 4 different categories. So we have supplies or goods. We have our services solicitations, public works and improvements, which are our construction solicitations, and surplus solicitations, where we're actually selling surplus items. So if you click on any of those, it'll take you onto the specifications list. And the things I wanted to point out before we look at that page is that all of our specifications are in PDF formats, and that all of them have a bid holders list. And it's a really good tool to register for the bid holders list, because that way then you're going to get notified of any questions and answers that get posted or any addendums that get posted for that particular bid. So this is an example of a services page for services solicitations. So you can see, whoops, sorry about that. I clicked too early. You can see it lists the specification number. Anytime you're dealing with a specification for the city, if you can reference the specification number, that's what's going to help us most. That's what you're going to use to register for the bid holders list. If you're submitting questions, that's just a really helpful tool to notice this bid specification number. And then we list the types. We have RFQs, RFIs, RFPs, and RFBs. So this will give you a quick overview. It'll tell you the date that the submittal is due. All of our submittals are due at 11 a.m., whatever date they are. And then you've got the specification title, should give you a little bit of an information about what it is that we're actually bidding on, so you can tell if you're interested or not. If you click on the specification link, that's where you can download the PDF. That's what's going to have the overview information, the project estimate information, who to send questions to, and all the details with regards to what forms need to be sent in and what bid proposal or price proposals, what that page will look like for. And then we have the link to register for the bid holders list. And if you click on that link, it'll take you to the screen, the left part of the screen. So that's for a lot of information, but as I said, it's a really good piece to register for it so that you can find out, get email notifications if any questions and answers are posted, if any addendums are posted that might change the bid spec or change the submittal date. And also, you can also then look at the City of Tacoma plan holders list. And so that I'm going to go back a page, because the page we're looking at here, if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, then you can look at plan holders lists for different specifications, which will give you what you see on the bottom part of the screen. And hopefully, is this coming through clear enough? Are the slides too small? Are they okay?
They're good.
Okay,
They're
thank
good.
you. The plan holders list that you register for, that's also a good place to look for contractors. Maybe you're a subcontractor and you want to see what contractors you could partner with on a bid. This is going to tell you who's already registered for the bid holders list. So that may give you some information about partnering. When you download the bid specification, it's going to have a cover sheet.
Can you please repeat the partnering aspect of it, please?
I'm sorry, what was that?
You were talking about if you want to partner with somebody on a bid. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So the plan holders list for a specification would show you who's already been registered for there. For the example I have, you have, and I don't know what these companies do. I apologize for that. So I might not be using a really good real world example, but the idea would be that if you see that, JBR Environmental Consultants is registered, and there might be something you can partner with them on in regards to this bid, or and actually this one isn't a great example because it's pulling up the citywide A&E list. So let's use a different example. Say you looked at, we have a bid out there for a building, and it involves some lighting pieces to it. We're doing some pieces on a building, and we're going to be putting in some new lighting fixtures. And so maybe you're a small business who deals with lighting, but you wouldn't necessarily reply to the whole bid that also might have flooring and walls, but you want to reply to the lighting piece of it. You could look on this list and see who are the general contractors. That's a construction one, but who are the general consultants who are listed on this? Maybe you want to contact them and say, hey, we do this piece of the bid. Can we partner with you on it if you don't have somebody already doing that piece for you? And we can provide that part of the quote and you do the rest of it. Does that make sense?
It's just like subcontracting or subconsulting.
Yes.
Something. Okay. All right.
Okay. So yeah, so this is just a good resource to see who's already registered for the bid and who might be replying to it that you could partner with. So when you download the PDF of the specification, it will have details in it about the scope of work, of course, and the estimate and when it's due. And then it's also going to have submittal requirements. Sometimes those are a list that's just in a paragraph that says, make sure you submit these forms. Sometimes it could be a submittal checklist, like the example I have here, where it says, hey, make sure you turn in the signature page and the price proposal and a record of prior contracts. So when you're looking at the specifications, if you're replying to them, it's critical to make sure that the forms are submitted at the same time as your proposal or by the deadline to be considered responsive. And so, and also anything that needs a signature, make sure it's signed. Anything that's asking for specific information, just, you know, make sure it's up to date, because that goes to being responsive and responsible. So we like to point that out to people, because we don't want somebody to submit a bid and then have to be rejected because the signature page wasn't signed or wasn't filled out completely. I mean, that's frustrating for us, and we really don't want you to have done all that work and not get to be evaluated. After the bid submittals, we have bid results that are on our webpage that are also available. And that's from the same purchasing page that has the contracting opportunities. There's a bid results section. It's organized by year. Click on the year, find the spec number that you're interested in seeing. Preliminary results are those that were read at bid opening. So the dollar amounts read at bid opening. Final results are after we've double checked the submittal amounts, and that's what will be posted on final. So in case there's any discrepancies, you know, when you have unit price and total price and all our bids go by unit price, sometimes people round up or round down and there's some discrepancies. So then we post the final after it's been double checked. What else did I want to mention? So, so some things to remember. This is, the breadcrumbs is sort of a standard internet thing. If you ever get in somewhere like you're into, if you're in the supplies and services and you want to go back to contracting opportunities, you can just simply click on contracting opportunities in the title bar or hit your back button. Our web pages are set up so that there's a sidebar so you can quickly get to different pieces of our web page. Anytime you see a seal of the City of Tacoma, that'll take you back to the homepage, the cityoftacoma.org homepage. And also on the cityoftacoma.org main page, you know, at the beginning we showed going through the government tab to get to the contracting opportunities. You can also click on the businesses tab and click on requests for bids and proposals. That'll take you directly to the contracting opportunities page. So we've got lots of different ways of getting there. It kind of depends on if you like to navigate through pages and see what's going on, if you want to just go directly to the submittals and see, or the solicitations and see what you want to reply to. As I mentioned, included in the slide deck is our AP information. That's something you typically don't need till after we're contracting, and you may have questions about invoicing, but we like to include it in there. And so that was a really brief presentation, just trying to hit some of the highlights. So I wanted to know what kind of questions you might have that I could help answer.
Okay, well, I don't see any of the questions popping up here, but we have a couple minutes. And so that'll give people a moment to kind of come up with some ideas. Also, we wanted to mention that we are posting your slideshow in the chat so that they can download this and get those links directly. So Tina, can you kind of review for us again the any set-asides or goals that the City of Tacoma has for small business utilization, you know, women minority business enterprises or, service disabled veterans or, any or all of that?
I can talk a little bit about that, and I know Jessica is following me, and she will have more information about that.
Okay.
We have an equity and contracting program, and currently we're using those requirements are on our construction contracts, but will be on our goods and services contracts. We also use the state's I always get this wrong, OWMBE website for registered OWMBEs on Washington site. And our departments can reach out directly to people who are registered on that site to engage for goods and services for $50,000 and under. Typically, a lot of them still will go out to bid. It's kind of a, what's the scope of work that the department has or the goods they're looking for and what fits it. They might go look out on the website and say, hey, nobody's really fits the code we're looking for. Now we're going to go out to bid. But that is something that we are looking to use more in the future. And on the slideshow too, for questions, there's my phone number. It is a voicemail only at this time because of teleworking. But and the email address I have on this is the generic that goes to our Tacoma purchasing admin staff so they can distribute questions to whoever's the best buyer for it. But if you wanted to reach out to me directly, it's my first initial last name at cityoftacoma.org. And I can throw that in the chat because I'm happy to answer questions anytime. We want to do whatever we can to help people do business with the city.
Well, thank you, Tina. We have one question from Marnie. So go ahead, Marnie.
Hey, Tina, I'm with PTAC and I help clients do research and when they're trying to decide where to target and who buys what they sell. Is there a site or how would somebody go about researching how the city of Tacoma has spent money, what they've bought and who they've bought it from?
That's a good question. That is not part of what I usually deal with. But I can find that out.
Sure, I'll send you an email and then we can chat about it offline.
Perfect. That would be great.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tina. And I know that we have Jessica being queued up here. So we'll kind of turn the reins over to Jessica. And it's kind of like old home week. So we'll let Jessica take control and run us to the end of the event.
Well, thank you for the opportunity for me to come and speak to you and reach out with any questions.
All right. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Tina.
Well, thank you, Tina, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica. I am a program technician at Washington Minority Business Development Agency. So everyone that you have heard about how to do business with City of Tacoma, and now let me tell you about some of the supportive services and program that we have available at Washington MBDA and also at the city as well. And so you might be wondering, what does Washington MBDA has anything to do with the city? By the way, I'm not sure if you are able to see my screen.
Not yet.
Okay, sorry about that. Sure. All right, thank you. I hope that you're able to see my screen here.
Yep.
Okay.
Looks good.
So Washington MBDA Center is established through a cooperative agreement with the City of Tacoma. We are hosted by the city under the Community Economic Development Division. So we work closely with the city, and our client is spread throughout the Washington state. Some are also in Oregon and some are also in Idaho. Sorry, some technical difficulties here. Let me see. Okay, there we go. So our primary focus is to help ethnic minority-owned small business in growing their business. And we have over 40 MBDA business centers throughout the nation. Our primary service area for our clients are access to capital, access to contracts, and access to markets. So I'm going to focus on number 1 and number 2. So as I don't think a lot of business are looking into expand internationally at this time. So in order to become our client, we are looking to help established ethnic minority-owned business. In particular, we can help you gain access to capital where we have a capacity building mentorship program where we pair small business, especially in the construction industry, to work with a prime contractor. And we also have partners in that program where we are able to gain, let you gain better access to the capital that way. Secondly, access to contracts. And on our website, which I will put down in the chat box shortly, is that we regularly publish public contracts with different agencies throughout the Washington states, letting our clients and also some non-clients be familiar with what are all the opportunities that are out there. We also have a couple different programs and tools that we are able to assist minority-owned small business in getting contracts where we provide a NAVSEA bid match service, similar to the service being provided by PTAC. So let's see. So basically, we meet where your service needs is. So majority of our clients are either in construction or architect and engineering industry. So here are some of the services that we provide. We help small business in registering or being certified for minority-owned business or women-owned business. And we also help you identify any financing opportunity that might assist your company in growing and gaining capital that you need to purchasing additional equipment and so forth. A lot of times when, if our clients is in construction estimating, they may need help with bidding and estimating. We have specialists and consultants that we work with on a regular basis to provide that type of service. So that's a little bit about the Minority Business Development Agency. I just wanted to pause for a second and see if there's any questions.
Jessica, good afternoon. This is Victor Ometu. How are you doing?
Doing great. Hi, Victor.
Fine. Just want to thank you for everything that you've been doing for people like me. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. So Victor, I hope you have received the information about the disadvantage, the Watch.DBE support program.
Yeah, I did. Completed it and sent it back to you.
Okay. All right. So at this time, I also want to bring up a opportunity for small business that we are also administering for is Watch.DBE support program. And for that program, you do have to be or currently have a certified DBE, which stands for Disadvantaged Business Enterprise through Washington State's Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise Center. So as long as you are working in highway construction industry and you have a current DBE status, we are happy to help you get enrolled into the program to provide you with additional service. So next, I want to take a brief moment to talk about City of Tacoma's equity in contracting efforts and programs. that are available to help small businesses. So the Equity in Contracting Ordinance was first passed through the city back in November of 2019. And the primary goal is to encourage small business in getting certified through Washington State's Office of Minority and Women Business Enterprise. The program also created race and gender conscious tools to help the city better track of the minority, women-owned, and small business in their participation with cities' public contracts. And like Tina said earlier, that we do have the goal of create requirements for all of cities' contract, including goods and services. But right now, all the requirement is on construction and public works contracts. So looking forward from March 2020 through now, we have set the following requirements on public works contracts. First is minority business enterprise. And second is women business enterprise. Third is small business enterprise, and that includes disadvantaged business enterprise utilization. So the city tracks the requirements and the progress of having small businesses that are certified in those 4 categories about their participation and involvement through a portal called B2G Now, which is a compliance monitoring portal that is to ensure payments are made to the small businesses on time, and that projects equity in contracting requirements are met. So here is an example of the different utilization rate with minority-owned small business, women-owned business, and small business, and also DBE utilization rate with cities' public works projects.
Jessica, this is Leslie. Real quick question. On here, I do not see the M/WBE utilization rate or any reference to it. So are those, if I'm a MWBE, does my situation put check boxes in each one of those categories?
In my brief conversation with the person that's responsible overseeing this program, is that if you are M/WBE, you will count for both categories.
Okay, good.
But I will have her information at the end of the slide where I can double check and make sure that is the correct answer. Okay. Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks.
So the next step for promoting and encourage small minority and women-owned business participation in City of Tacoma's project, we are encouraging small business to get certified through OMWBE, which is a state certification body. And that's where MBDA comes in which we can help you first lay out the groundwork and let you know what all the documents and process look like to get certified in the area that you are seeking certification for. And also, we realize that there is always a need for more certified business. So then we could promote small business utilization on all city projects in general. And lastly, this is Malika Godo's contacting information at the city, where you can ask or call her for any questions that you may have about a particular ongoing project or even project that's coming online. She will be able to give you some guidance with that.
Thanks, Jessica. So because this is the city of Tacoma, do you have restrictions as to your outreach or, geographic area that you can cover?
So like you said, Leslie, as this is just City of Tacoma Public Works project at this time. So in our efforts at MBDA to help small business, there's no geographic restriction, honestly, to help a small business in getting contracts or getting access to capital. We are open to all small business as long as you are a established minority-owned small business with 51% of ownership that's owned by a minority.
And does this include self-designated minority, or does it have to all come through OMWBE?
So that's a really good question. You do not need to have any current minority certification status. As long as you can prove that you are a minority-owned business, ethnic minority-owned business, I should say, then you will fit that profile.
So with the federal government, when they are looking at socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses, they actually have a laundry list of international places that do not qualify as socially or economically depressed, individuals. Years ago, I had I've had a lot of immigrants come to the United States and, go down this path for certification. However, I had one client who was from the country of Jordan that did not qualify just because of where she was from.
I don't believe that our program is that restrictive, similar to a lot of federal programs. Then again, some of the cases are case-by-case basis. So I am happy to put my contact information down in a chat box. So in case someone have a specific questions about whether or not they would qualify to become our clients, feel free to reach out to me.
Okay. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.
So, do we have any other questions, concerns, comments, or
One from Marnie in chat.
say
Is
what?
there any consideration for veteran-owned businesses, Jessica?
So for MBDA right now, that is not, you do not have to have a veteran-owned status or certification to become our client. As long as you are ethnic minority, we are able to assist you.
Sorry about that. My reference was in regards to the City of Tacoma's minority women small business enterprises. If whether or not they were utilizing the state's veteran-owned verification, or if there was any veteran consideration with City of Tacoma purchasing.
That I would probably have to get back to you, Marnie. I see the city has gone away with their own, because they used to certify small business in different certifications. So right now they have gone away with that. So they are looking to follow everything that is the same as from OMWBE.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I think most the issue with our state currently is that the veteran-owned business certification is not a size-based verification. With the state of Washington, it's just veteran-owned. So I think to work with City of Tacoma, if they have their SBE through OMWBE, then that would be valid and not take into consideration the veterans. So size is more important than veteran status. Gotcha. Okay.
That's
I
a good
was-
point, Marnie.
Mhm. Thank you, Marnie.
And then I had one myself, in regards to the study that was done. I'm looking at the, let's see here. 2019 date for the ordinance approval, 2020 March is when they started the program. They're 7% up from 5% during disparity study period. Do you know when that study period was? Was that the 2018?
Are you
one?
looking at this? Are you looking at the
For under the key performance indicators.
website right now? Okay.
I'm just looking at the second to last slide.
So then you're looking at when that got adopted, is that right?
Well, it just says there's a 5% increase in women and 2% or 5% increase in minority, 2% increase in women. And I'm wondering if that's over a period of a year, 3 years, 2 years, just how long ago the study was done. Mostly just a curiosity.
So that utilization rate is project specific. So I do not actually have the criteria on how that is determined by the projects. So Andrew, I may have to get back to you on that one.
I'm a numbers guy. Those are the numbers. I was curious. No rush.
Well,
Okay.
well, thank you, Jessica. Welcome to being immersed into the types of questions that you get from small businesses. So you did a really great job. Thank you so much. And for those of you that don't know, Jessica was was the one who worked so hard to get this whole PortGen 2021 up and running. And then she got pulled away by MBDA. But we're thankful that she came back today to visit with everybody and answer your questions. And she's a tremendous resource, not just for the City of Tacoma or MBDA, but she actually knows a lot about the Small Business Transportation Resource Center. And she might know a thing or two about Washington PTAC too. So a good all-around resource. So with that, any other questions? Corey, Brenda, Victor, anybody have anything else? Okay, so with that, we will call it a day. So thank you everyone for coming. We will have the video of this published soon. And we uploaded the links for you to have access to all the slideshows today. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time.